I am such a big fan of Avatar: The Last Airbender. I could drone on and on all day about how much I've grown to love the overarching themes and the world building and the music, but I think the one aspect that's the most important to the show's success, though, is the characters. So few shows directed at younger audiences that featured characters with such brilliant and natural development, with motivations and desires that make sense, with hopes and dreams and fears and goals that change and grow over time in a way that is really organic and fits perfectly with the show's themes. Of course, there's one character in the show who I really adore above all the rest, a character whose development and growth feels so well handled and so well earned that I genuinely believe that Avatar should be required viewing for any aspiring writer looking to create a compelling character with complexity and depth. I don't know why I'm keeping it a secret like you guys haven't already read the friggin' title. It's Zuko. I'm talking about Zuko. Zuko is one of the most well-written and well-developed characters of any show of the modern television age, and is certainly one of the most complex. We follow him in the series as he goes from a hopeful and driven young prince to a bitter but incredibly determined outcast to a confused and conflicted anti-hero to a fully redeemed and, yes, quite honorable protagonist. A lot of shows try to do the whole villain eventually joins the side of good thing to varying degrees of success, but few feel as natural and as organic as that of Prince Zuko. And I don't know if I'm going to do a very good job explaining why in this video, but hopefully you'll get a kick out of me yammering on about how much I like one of my favorite fictional characters anyway. Also, in case you haven't seen the show before, big time heckin' spoilers ahead!
Try to understand. My nephew is a complicated young man. He has been through much.
Zuko as a person is complicated. He's a young man who is constantly at war with himself, struggling between doing the right thing and obsessively trying to restore his honor. All throughout the first season or so, he screams at the top of his lungs that nothing on this planet is more important than the singular goal of capturing the Avatar, yet multiple times he would sacrifice prime opportunities to do so in order to do things like saving his crew from a storm or rescuing his uncle Iroh from Earth Kingdom soldiers. In mid-season 2, he began to gain different perspectives from, and maybe a bit of empathy for, some of the people in the Earth Kingdom who were suffering the ill effects of his father's war, and yet he still took it upon himself to steal an ostrich horse from one such family to make his and his uncle's journey easier. At the tail end of Season 2, Zuko seemed on the verge of a true point of redemption thanks to his experiences and his uncle's wisdom, only for his sister Azula to manipulate him and tempt him with that oh-so-precious honor, convincing him to betray his uncle, Katara, and the Avatar at the very last second to help Azula conquer Ba Sing Se. And then, of course, even when he returned home, a conquering hero, once more the proud crown prince of the Fire Nation, he couldn't even really be happy about it, because, despite the fact that he now presumably had everything he ever really wanted, he only got it by turning his back on the only person who ever really cared. It certainly doesn't help that he always felt pulled from both ends by the domineering will of his power-hungry father and the efforts of his uncle Iroh to turn Zuko away from that sort of life. Hell, even his ancestry is rife with conflict, because it turns out that his paternal and maternal great-grandfathers were Fire Lord Sozin and Avatar Roku respectively, two former best friends who became bitter foes once Sozin went on ahead and started the 100-Year War despite Roku's warnings. Shit, and I thought my family had problems. Well, I mean they do, but like, you know, none of them have started century-long wars. That I know of.
Your Zuko costume's pretty good, but your scar's on the wrong side.
The scar's not on the wrong side!
Listen, we all know I have to dedicate a section of this video to talk about Zuko's scar. You can't not talk about the scar in a video about Prince Zuko. I'm pretty sure that's actually super illegal. The reason it demands so much attention from fans and analysts of Zuko, though, is not even just because it's the first thing you'd notice when you look at him, but also because of just how important it is to literally everything Zuko does. During his youth, Zuko spoke out in a war meeting against a high-ranking general's plan, one that would involve sacrificing a newly trained platoon of soldiers to gain a strategic advantage. Because of this outburst, Zuko was made to participate in an Agni Kai, or a fire duel, for what was seen as an act of serious disrespect. However, instead of the general, Zuko saw his own father, the actual Fire Lord, across the arena because, hey, guess what? When you had your little moral outburst in the Fire Lord's war room, turns out it was technically the Fire Lord that you disrespected. So, you know, whoops. Zuko, understandably, was horrified at the idea of having to fight for his life against his own father, so he refused to fight back. Like, at all. And Ozai responded about as amicably as one would expect in this situation, declaring his son to be a dishonorable coward, burning half of his face, and banishing him from the only home he's ever known until he could capture the Avatar, who disappeared a century ago and hadn't been seen since.
Hey, you guys mind if I put in my mixtape?
The scar is not only a mark of shame forcibly branded onto his face by a tyrannical and ruthless leader in response to what the latter felt was an act of shame and cowardice, but it's also a really rather blatant mark of abuse on Ozai's part, a constant reminder of the callous and cruel nature with which he would treat his own children if they didn't serve his purpose as he saw fit. Yet, despite having to wear this abuse and mistreatment and shame upon half of his face for the actual rest of his life, Zuko was driven, to the point of obsession really, to capture the Avatar, to regain his honor and his father's love. The scar is so important for Zuko as a character, not only from a visual design standpoint, but also as a means of informing his decisions and his motivations. Literally, his entire character arc is kickstarted by this scar. Which of course makes it all the more baffling that the Last Airbender movie hardly gives Zuko a scar at all. Seriously, Dev Patel, that is not a burn. That's you leaving a gas station cheeseburger on your face for about 2 minutes.
Zuko, it's time we had a talk about your hair. It's gone too far.
Whenever people talk about Zuko, so much of the discussion revolves around his scar, and for good reason. Like I said before, it's the catalyst for his entire character arc. Something that I think isn't brought up nearly enough is another significant change we see to his appearance throughout the whole series. His hair. It shouldn't be any surprise to anyone who's watched Avatar for more than 0 seconds that the world and the cultures of the individual nations are heavily influenced from those in our own world, particularly Asian cultures, with the Fire Nation being quite derivative of Japan. You can see this in the architecture, the clothing, the history of industrialism, and yes, even the hairstyles. But the biggest thing would probably be the Fire Nation's huge emphasis on the ideas of honor and shame within their culture. And boy howdy, does Prince Zuko sure love him some honor.
Honor, 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 honor.
All kidding aside though, something that gets used brilliantly as a non-verbal metaphor for Zuko's character growth and his own changing connection to his personal honor is how his hair changes throughout the series. Throughout Season 1, he has the traditional Fire Nation top bun, keeping with those traditions despite his banishment and clinging to the honor he hopes to restore by capturing the Avatar. Early in Season 2, however, we see the first major change in Zuko's hair. After being confronted by his sister Azula, who was sent by their father Ozai to capture him as a prisoner, he and Uncle Iroh escape and take rest at the bank of a river. There, Zuko uses a knife to chop off the top bun he so proudly sported, his own personal symbol of honor and tradition, and tosses it down the river. From that point on, Zuko's hair grows slowly throughout the rest of Season 2 as he lives his life as an outcast and a fugitive in the Earth Kingdom. Eventually, by the time all the main characters arrive in Ba Sing Se, Zuko's hair is wild and shaggy, much more akin to the common folk that he had spent much of his banishment looking down upon. It's around this time that Iroh tries to get Zuko to come around to a life of peace and simple prosperity in Ba Sing Se, running a tea shop and having really awkward dates. And it almost works until that whole backstabbing his uncle and overthrowing the Earth Kingdom thing. At the start of Season 3, when Zuko is welcomed back into the open arms of the Fire Nation, that wild and unkempt hair is suddenly neatly styled back into the traditional top bun. However, it's not quite the same as it was before. You see, during his banishment, Zuko only had the top bun and choosing to shave off everything else. However, now he had the top bun like before, but all the rest of his hair was still there too. He didn't bother to style it quite in the same fashion as he did during the entirety of his exile until Season 2. This is another really nice, subtle way to communicate Zuko's character at this point in the series. He thought for sure that his actions in Ba Sing Se, that letting his father believe he had killed the Avatar, would magically fix every problem in his life, but he was only able to do so by betraying Iroh, by betraying the one person who truly, unconditionally cared about him as a person, as opposed to a means to an end. But he didn't want to have to deal with this seething guilt and resentment inside of him, because everything for him should have been fine at that point. So, he put on the armor and the garb, put his wild hair into the subdued traditional top bun, and played the role of the proud crown prince, as if everything was right in the world, even if everything still felt wrong. Also, I think it's really interesting that in the scenes where Zuko talks to Iroh in prison, he doesn't even bother with the top knot at all. Like, he knows he only has his life in the Fire Nation back in part because of what he did to his uncle, so he can't bring himself to put on the visual facade of the Fire Nation's conquering hero, even as he outwardly misdirects his anger and self-loathing at his uncle because he doesn't actually want to deal with his immense shame and guilt.
You're a crazy old man. You're crazy. And if you weren't in jail, you'd be sleeping in a gutter.
In the darkest times, hope is something you give yourself. That is the meaning of inner strength.
You know, I've been talking about all these internal conflicts and struggles and problems and obstacles that Zuko has had to deal with and overcome, but I'd be remiss if I left out the primary person who helped him do so. His uncle Iroh. Iroh was so instrumental in helping Zuko to change who he was as a person and become a more complete character. In a lot of ways, he was a father figure to Zuko. Certainly much more than Ozai, though. Kinda like saying that being hugged is better than being super kicked. Iroh did more for Zuko than try to keep him out of trouble like a father facsimile, though. He would often impart invaluable and precious knowledge and philosophy onto Zuko, helping the bitter and angry banished prince gain quite a bit of perspective on the world around him. And ultimately, it was Iroh's many teachings and his genuine love and care for Zuko as a person that led to Zuko denouncing his father, joining the Avatar, and fighting to end the 100-Year War. And it's not like Zuko was some sort of passive protagonist just going along for the ride either. Iroh's teachings influenced a lot of his decisions, of course, but the key word there is influenced, not forced. Iroh may have shown Zuko the door, but Zuko still had to be the one to open it.
Why am I so bad at being good?
Ultimately, what makes Zuko such a compelling character isn't just the fact that he has a tragic backstory that pulls at the heartstrings, and it's not just that he goes through significant physical and emotional changes throughout the show, but it's also that he makes mistakes. Not just that he makes mistakes, mind you, but that he learns from them, genuinely, and uses those experiences to grow as a person. Like I said just a little bit ago, no matter what amount of Zuko's redemption arc you can pin on the influence of Uncle Iroh, Zuko still had to make the choice to reject the facade of happiness he had created for himself in the Fire Nation. He still had to make the choice to denounce his father's war on the world and declare that he would help the Avatar defeat him. And as hard as it was, and boy howdy did Team Avatar not make it easy for him, Zuko had to make the choice not only to claim that he was sorry for all his wrongdoings, but prove it. I've spoken at length before about how much I dislike it when the resolution of someone's character arc feels unearned and honestly kind of forced, but trust me when I tell you that this is not the case here. And it wasn't just a handwave solution either. This took half of Season 3. It took time, effort, real genuine shows of humility and trustworthiness, and yeah, even a couple life-changing field trips in order to get everyone on Team Avatar to accept him as an ally and as a friend, despite everything that he had done. Really, I think this is why Zuko's character arc is one of my favorite in any kind of fictional media, because we get to see his turmoil, his growth, his mistakes, and ultimately him actually making up for those mistakes, not just redeeming himself through words or circumstance or passive convenience, but through his actions. By the end of Avatar: The Last Airbender, Zuko had become the Fire Lord in a new era of peace and prosperity, and it never felt like a ham-fisted happy ending for the sad prince with the burned face. It felt earned and deserved, because it was. It's just like his Uncle Iroh said, he struggled, he suffered, but he always followed his own path. In the end, Prince Zuko restored his own honor. Hey, so if you made it to the end of this entirely too long video about why I like Zuko from Avatar so darn much, then you know what? You're pretty dang cool. Be sure to give this video a like if you liked it, and let me know what you like about Zuko in the comments below. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video, friendos.